Assam braces for the fallout of the publication of the National Register of Citizens that aims to identify illegal immigrants in the state. The Supreme Court will hear the matter today. The rupee slid to a record low against the dollar last week. We explain how exchange rates came to be determined. And the Delhi government is all set to roll out its happiness curriculum for 9 lakh students. Can happiness be taught in schools? It's Monday, July 2nd. You are likely to have heard that the Indian rupee collapsed to an all-time low against the US dollar, breaking the rupee 69 per US dollar mark for the first time in history last Thursday. To understand why this happened, we need to know how the exchange rate is determined. What do we mean by the rupee appreciating or depreciating? The exchange rate is essentially the price of a currency. What drives the price of the currency? Like any other commodity, it is the demand and supply. When there is more demand and the commodity is in low supply, the price increases. In this case, the value of the currency appreciates. Similarly, if the demand is less and the supply is more, it decreases the price of the commodity. In this case, the currency depreciates in value. Let's understand this in greater detail. Whenever money comes into the economy, through exports or through investments, then the currency of that particular economy appreciates because the local currency is in greater demand. Conversely, if your imports increase, which means if money goes out of your economy to pay for commodities, then your currency would depreciate. There are global and local factors that affect the exchange rate of the rupee. Global factors cannot be controlled by India. For example, if there is volatility in global markets, then there is typically flight of capital to the United States. That strengthens the dollar, which in turn means the rupee weakens in comparison. Or if the US Federal Reserve increases the interest rates, that would mean more return on investment there, and that increases the demand for the dollar, which would mean the dollar strengthens. When Indian exports go up, we get more dollars into our economy, which in turn results in the appreciation of the Indian rupee. Now, why is the exchange rate for rupee determined against the dollar? Or why does the dollar have primacy in exchange rates? From late 1870s to 1914, when the First World War began, the gold standard monetary system, or the classical gold standard, was in place, which essentially meant each unit of currency was backed up by an equivalent amount of gold in the treasury. All countries fixed the value of their currencies in terms of a specified amount of gold. As each currency was fixed in terms of gold, exchange rates between participating currencies were also fixed. At the start of World War I in 1914, several countries suspended the gold standard so as to increase money supply to pay for the war. At the end of the war, some of the countries tried to restore the gold standard, but not all were successful. This is primarily because of an inadequate supply of gold for reserve purposes. Given the limited supply of gold in the 1920s, the system moved to a gold exchange standard, where currencies would be partially backed by gold. Now, fast forward to the end of World War II in 1945, also called the most destructive and expensive war in history. Europe and Japan were war-ravaged. Mainland United States was relatively insulated from war and was also a producer and supplier of goods for Europe. Many of these countries faced inflation, depleted gold supplies, and they owed debt to the United States. The world's multilateral financial and trading system faced a serious threat. It is then that representatives of 44 countries gathered at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, United States. The United States had accumulated 70% of the world's gold reserves. Under the system arrived at Bretton Woods, all currencies would be linked to or backed by the dollar, and the dollar was linked to gold. The value of the US dollar was expressed in gold at the set price of $35 per ounce, or the promise to redeem dollars for gold at $35 an ounce. Essentially, the US dollar became the reserve currency for global trade. Two institutions, the IMF and the World Bank, were formed to lend money to those that couldn't get it from other sources and to aid less developed countries. The Bretton Woods system was in place till 1971. Here's why it couldn't sustain. There was no set reserve ratio, which meant there was no stipulation that a certain amount of gold was required for a certain amount of dollars. So the United States kept printing dollars. There just wasn't enough gold to back the dollars printed. In 1965, French President Charles de Gaulle demanded that the US ship back their dollars in converted gold to France. Most countries joined France in demanding gold for dollars. And in 1971, US President Richard Nixon ended the convertibility to gold. But by then, the US dollar had already become the world's dominant reserve currency. Nixon's decision led to what is in existence currently, free-floating fiat currencies. Fiat money is currency that a government has declared to be legal tender, but it is not backed by a physical commodity. The value of fiat money is derived from the relationship between supply and demand. Now, the US dollar is globally the most traded currency, which is to say all the important commodities in the global market are traded in US dollars. Most of the international transactions between countries and companies are conducted in dollars. It also remains the dominant reserve currency for central banks and many institutional funds worldwide. The Supreme Court will today hear a plea seeking the extension of the deadline to publish the final draft of the updated National Register of Citizens in Assam. What is the NRC? The NRC is the register containing names of Indian citizens and is an attempt to identify illegal immigrants in Assam. The first NRC was prepared in 1951 and is now being updated. Wait, why does Assam require an NRC? And why is it being updated? An exercise that's not being carried out in any other Indian state. Let's rewind a bit. In 1978, then Chief Election Commissioner S.L. Shahder noted large-scale inclusions of foreign nationals in the electoral rolls of Assam and the possibility of such foreign nationals forming a majority of the population. That statement would, in the words of political scientist Sanjeev, become the lightning rod for the Assam movement. Between 1979 and 1985, the All Assam Students' Union and the Assam Ganasangram Parishad spearheaded a movement to bring attention to the issue of illegal immigrants, demanding that such immigrants be disenfranchised and deported. This period saw political instability and some of the worst ethnic violence, including the Nelly massacre of 1983. 6 years after the start of the agitation, the Assam Accord was signed between the Rajiv Gandhi government and leaders of the Assam movement. As per the agreement, those who entered Assam before 1966 would be considered citizens. Those migrants who came between 1966 and March 24, 1971, the Bangladesh War, remember, began on 25th March, would be denied voting rights for 10 years but could enjoy other citizenship rights. Those who entered Assam after the 1971 cutoff would be detected and deported. The National Register of Citizens, currently being updated, follows the terms of this accord. How does one make it to the NRC? To make it to the NRC, an individual must prove that they or their ancestors entered Assam before March 24, 1971. The documents to prove so would be by way of the 1951 National Register of Citizens or the pre-1971 electoral rolls. The individual would also have to provide documents certifying their relationship with said ancestor. How many people are estimated to not find mention in the NRC, and what happens to them? The numbers are unclear. Activists, though, say it will run into lakhs. It is also unclear what will happen to those identified as illegal immigrants. Will they be in detention camps? Where will the detention camps be? The elephant in the room is the fact that the deportation of those identified under this process to Bangladesh is easier said than done. Bangladesh has reportedly expressed concern over what they fear could be an exodus, creating a Rohingya refugee crisis-like situation. What is the centre's Citizenship Amendment Bill, and how does that queer the pitch? Making the situation complicated is the centre's intention to pass the Citizenship Amendment Bill. The proposed law seeks to allow illegal migrants who are Hindus, Christians, Buddhists, Sikhs, Jains and Parsis from Afghanistan, Pakistan and Bangladesh to become eligible for citizenship. The clauses of the amendment imply that citizenship will be facilitated only for non-Muslim minorities from these three countries. There have been protests in Assam over this bill, saying it contradicts the exercise to update the National Register of Citizens in Assam because this in effect will allow an estimated 1 lakh plus Hindu Bangladeshis to live in Assam. Meanwhile, 9 lakh students of classes between nursery and 8th in Delhi state schools are all set to begin a special course in happiness starting today. The brainchild of Aam Aadmi Party Education Minister Manish Sisodia, the course aims to create Sarvagun Sampann or versatile human beings who could serve society with happiness. This will be launched by the Dalai Lama today. Are there books and chapters on laughing? No, the curriculum is activity-based and has been devised to focus on meditation, moral learnings, mental exercises and yoga. It does have a periodic assessment on a happiness index though, exact details on which are awaited. The ARP experiment is based on precedent. The curriculum is inspired by Harvard's happiness course, Positive Psychology, which includes a guest lecture on humor, and reminds us of Yale's happiness course, Psychology and the Good Life, which was taken up by 1,200 students, making it the most popular course in the history of the university. These are just two of an increasing trend that more and more students are looking for textbook answers to happiness. But has any 6-year-old ever been happy about meditating? Do primary and secondary students need classes on happiness? Or would Delhi's little ones be happier if left to their own devices? We'll just have to put it to test. Think about that, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.